Like every 6-year-old, I adored pizza when I was that age. There was nothing more special to me than those end-of-the-year pizza parties you get in the first grade for good behavior. On that fateful day, I grabbed my flimsy paper plate and I rushed to the beginning of the line, only to be greeted with a box full of pepperoni pizza. Dejectedly, I sat back down in my seat. And when my friends had asked me why I hadn't eaten anything, I told them I was allergic to pepperoni. What I didn't tell my friends, however, is that I had lied. I didn't even know if a pepperoni allergy was a thing at the time. The real reason was that I am Muslim, and eating pork isn't exactly allowed in Islam. And I know that not eating pizza for one day isn't the end of the world, by any means. But it was never about the pizza. I was upset that I lied to my friends, but it was what my parents had taught me to do from a young age. They told me to keep things like my race, our religion, and most importantly, my religion, a secret. I believe their goal was to protect me from the anti-Muslim sentiment that still persists to this day. However, all it made me feel was alienated from both my friends and my family. Another time, I was 13 years old, and I was discussing with my mother about my future college plans. I had told her that when I go to college, I would like to move out and live in a dorm. And now my mother was adamantly against this idea. She said that I can move out when I got married because that was the way that Muslims did things. She said that I can get a husband after I go to college because he can support me in my career. Now I was against this idea because I wanted a chance to live my life and explore the world before settling down. When I told my mother this, she laughed and called me a typical American. Now, I didn't understand what she meant by this because, yeah, by definition, I am an American. I was born here. So what? What does it have to do with anything? I couldn't understand the cultural divide between Islam and America. One was my religion, my personal beliefs, while the other was my nationality, where I was born. By definition, these two aspects of my life shouldn't intersect. I wasn't any less Muslim for being an American, and I wasn't any less American for being a Muslim because these two things weren't comparable. I think the issue lies in the fact that we tend to put each other in boxes, categories, or labels that each come with its own connotations, values, and ideals. We can't just be something. Rather, we force ourselves to rigidly follow the values and ideals that come with our culture, religion, race, and political affiliation. For example, many Muslims value modesty. They tend to dress and act conservatively. To many of these Muslims, I was never Muslim enough because I didn't wear hijab, I didn't cover up my hair, and I wasn't the polite person they wanted me to be. By contrast, many Americans value pride and individuality. They tended to wear revealing clothing, and they believed their actions spoke louder than words. To many of these Americans, I was never American enough because I was too modest, and I was a doormat. To Muslims, I was never good enough as a Muslim because I covered up way too little. And to Americans, I was never good enough as an American because I covered up way too much. But these issues traveled far past my modesty and the way I dressed, all the way to my demeanor and my very personality. Some of my family members would make side comments whenever I would talk about embarrassing topics like puberty or periods so openly. And my American friends would often chastise me for being so religious and to tell me to calm down and just be yourself. One such comment that's stuck with me to this day happened in middle school. This kid had told me that I was an American now, so I no longer needed to do things like wear full sleeves or avoid pork or fast during Ramadan. Now, this comment has stuck with me, has fascinated me as well, because not only was I always in America, I was born here, but also because it seemed to imply that Islam was somehow holding me back from the freedom that the US provided me. But what about my freedom to eat what I wanted, dress how I wanted, and fast whenever I wanted? But also, what about my freedom to talk about embarrassing topics, not cover up my hair, or do my own thing before starting a family? I just wanted to say that I am both a Muslim and an American. I was born into the faith, but I was also born here. I exist, and I am not a paradox. But due to these differences, many Muslims and Americans struggle to get along. I believe this issue lies in psychology and the role culture plays in human behavior. Many people tend to follow their culture very religiously, obviously. And our cultures often define how we act, think, and learn. It defines our behavior and our core beliefs, and it also defines our values. For example, a Dutch psychologist named Gert Hofstede conducted a study in which he found he could organize the world's cultures in two different categories: individualism and collectivism. Individualistic cultures, like many Americans, often put the values and needs of themselves before others, while collectivistic cultures, like most Muslims, put the values and needs of others before themselves. Case in point, my parents growing up would often suggest to me that I become either a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. They believed that these careers would be best suited to help support my family financially. However, my friends believed that following your dreams and your own desires were way more important than that. Although they agreed that money was an important factor in deciding a future career, they believed that doing what you want to do was way more valuable than that. And although my parents acknowledged that following your own dreams was important, they knew that being a starving artist didn't put any food on the table. The cultural divide and misunderstandings between Muslims and Americans are what set us apart. As humans, we are so quick to put ourselves in little groups that we refuse to understand the other side. It is essential that we understand how rigid this way of thinking truly is. And the first step to stop this is to listen. I mean, genuinely listen to what the other side has to say, because that's the only way we can learn that the other side isn't all that different after all. In fact, many Muslims and Americans share the same values. From growing up in a Muslim household and going to an American school, I have learned that both Muslims and Americans value charity and giving to one another. One of the fundamental pillars of Islam is charity. In fact, we have to give 2.5% of our wealth to those in need every year. And I find that to be so beautiful, how Islam promotes charity and being kind to one another. Americans value the exact same thing. Countless times on the news, I have seen stories about Americans going out of their way to help other people and those less fortunate than them without any compensation in return. That is amazing, and I love that about our society, that we can go out and do things just like that. Both Americans and Muslims just want to improve themselves and their groups. I have heard many stories about Muslims going out of their way to open mosques to teach the others, especially Americans, about Islam. But I don't really hear as many stories about the other way around, about Americans teaching Muslims about their own cultures and values. Instead, we both need to meet on a common ground in which we can reach out, whether in physical or online communities, sit back, listen, and learn from each other, because we both have insightful values and ideas that we can genuinely learn from. That is the only way we can fix the rift and the hatred that many American Muslims feel on a daily basis. We, Muslims, Americans, and everyone else are all people, and we should be treated as such. Also, it has been 6 years since that fateful conversation with my mom. And as a college student, I would like to say that I do live in a dorm now. And I commute back home on the weekends. Life is all about compromises. I know that the American and Muslim identity can be a difficult one to comprehend. But if I can make it work, then what is stopping all of you? Thank you.